Good evening. Good evening. Let me get this right real quick. Blessings to the good people. Happy Wednesday. I hope all is well with everybody. Thank you for being here this evening. You know what day this is, you know what segment this is. Shout outs to my poets, writers, content creators, and all else in between. Glory, praise, and honor. Um, I want to give you a quick intro. If you're not familiar with her, get familiar. This is one of my favorite parts of the week. Tap in, grab you something to drink, get comfortable, and let's have a good time. Shout out, Chef. I see you in the building, sir. Sid, I'm going to turn the mic over to you. I'm gonna let you do your thing, and let's get it.
I'm on mute. Oh my gosh. Okay. Hello, my name is Sydney. For those of you that don't know me, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and one of my interests is like mental well being and how to design your life in a way that uh, maximizes your potential and improves your psychology, your physical health, because all of that is intertwined. How your mind is doing will affect how your body is doing, and vice versa. And whether we want to believe it or not, our physical environment has a tremendous impact on both of these things as well. So I wanted to talk about today as you saw from the title, the benefits of minimalism. Um, there's a trend right now of minimalism. Uh, there's kind of more of an influencer version of minimalism, and then there's what I call like the wholesome minimalism. I'll be talking more of the wholesome version of minimalism because I think there's two kind of avenues of minimalism that I've seen, where there's more of the aesthetic minimalism where the people have limited stuff on display in their house, um, but they're still intaking a lot. It's just trading items and kind of more of a rotation of belongings, where they're constantly replacing things, buying things, but they also don't keep a lot of those things, or they like rotate them in and out. So, so yeah. First, I wanted to get into a little bit of my own history with minimalism because, believe it or not, I'm not what you classify as a minimalist yet. I'm working on it, but having two kids and a third on the way, and then my own interests, I still love to collect. You can probably have seen my collection in the background. I collect antique books and really cool objects for like fossils and stuff like that. So I'm definitely not the extreme type minimalist that you can see, but I've done a lot of work in my life to get myself to this point where I'm not a huge collector. Like I'm not focused on collecting anymore, um, where I used to be. When I was younger, um, pre high school, or honestly pre college, I had a tendency to hoard things. I think I got it from both situation experience, as well as hereditary predisposition. Minimalism or hoarding disorder does or can pass through the family. If you have a direct relative with hoarding disorder, you're more likely to also adopt those characteristics. It's not a guarantee, and some of it might have to do with upbringing. And like if you grow up in the home of a hoarder, people usually follow two paths where they either also become a hoarder themselves or they go completely strict. I don't really want stuff because that was really stressful and I didn't want to deal with that. I would categorize myself as or I used to. It was a lot worse when I was in college, high school era, where mine, I think, was rooted a lot in anxiety. When I was 3, 4, my mom had a brain tumor and she was in and out of the hospital for a while. It affected how she looked because it was like right in her into fashion and just collecting anything that was cool. I collected books, all sorts of knickknacks. If it was animal anything, I would want it blankets and little statues, and as I said, stuffed animals, pillows, you name it. I if it was related to something that I was interested, I would collect it. But over the years, I started to notice certain costs to those behaviors, because one of the things that we have to keep in mind is items come with a cost with purchase, besides the monetary cost. When we have objects around our house, they act as a subconscious to-do list where they are representations of our former self, and they call to us whether we are paying attention to it or not. If we have bookshelves of books that we've never read before, we'll subconsciously see them and be like, oh, I need to be reading these. Oh, I'm guilty because I bought all these books and I haven't touched them yet. And things like clothing that is unworn or things that don't fit us anymore, trinkets that are broken, electronics that we can't identify or are broken, all sorts of stuff in the house that need fixing or need donating or just aren't our style anymore. All of these things in our house speak to us, and it's mentally fatiguing, especially if you also are, for example, in the closet. You can get decision fatigue if you have too many clothes because it's tiring to like put together the outfits and stuff like that. Granted, everyone has their different interests, different personalities, and different people will value different types of items. So there is no issue if like maybe you just really love fashion and having a diverse set of outfits and stuff like that. But yeah, speak to us, and they also demand work. Things need dusting, things need maintenance, things need cleaning, and like we have to wash all our dishes, we have to wash all our clothes, we might mend our clothes, we might have to if we have all sorts of really cool carpets throughout our house or rugs throughout our house, then we have to maintain those. And then a lot of people also have pets. So it can be very, very overwhelming and mentally overstimulating to have a lot of items in your house. There's 5 classifications of hoarding disorder. The first 2 levels are considered functional hoarding, where once you get to 3, 4, and 5 levels, you become progressively less functional in society. It also is characterized by the mindset of the individual with hoarding disorder, because once you get up to level like 5, 4, 5, you start to have a lot of denial, a lot of mental distress in relation to the stuff. Not this in the They have distress that they have the stuff, but there's also a distinct, very deep attachment to these items, and they'll experience very extreme distress letting go of the objects. I watched a lot of the hoarding shows. There's version in the United States, and there's also version in Britain that they've made TV shows on. And there are some people that literally would rather die than get rid of their stuff, or at least they feel like they would. They've recently, according to the diagnostic and DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is what psychiatrists use to diagnose disorders. It gives the parameters of what exactly falls under those particular disorder symptomology. And as I said, there are 5 stages of hoarding. I think I didn't finish what I was saying, but they just reclassified hoarding as its own disorder. It used to be classified under obsessive compulsive disorder, but they've recently, in the past couple of years, separated the two. And so obsessive compulsive disorder is now categorized as a different thing than hoarding disorder, because people with obsessive compulsive disorder don't always have hoarding disorder, and people with hoarding disorder don't always have obsessive compulsive, though they can be, you can have them at the same time. So the first stage of hoarding disorder is probably where a lot of people are at, that have a lot of stuff and have difficulty managing all of that stuff. It's probably what you can kind of imagine in a chaotic household with lots of kids, where you have toys everywhere, books everywhere, papers all over the table or counters, dishes like piled up next to the sink, clothes, like piles of laundry. Things don't really have a place. They're just kind of all over the place. But you're still able to access the rooms. Your hallways, your doors, they're still accessible. You're still able to move from room to room with no problems. But in the minds of the people, there is that sentimental attachment to the objects, which makes them hard to get rid of. Experience, as well as what I've seen in other people, what I've researched myself. I've done a lot of deep work on hoarding because of my past experiences. I've noticed that there's 2 kind of or different reasonings, or reason categories, that people will keep the stuff. One, they either have an emotional attachment to that item because it's connected to a person or a time period or a particular location or something that was important to them. And then there's others that keep objects because they think they're going to be useful in the future. That is one that I see a lot. But also the sentimental attachment object is quite common, and it usually is the more distressing avenue. And then obviously some people have a combination of the two. I definitely had the combination of the two. I still have those tendencies, but I've done a lot of mental work to create thinking tools that help me think my way out of the uh, the anxiety that comes with letting things go. It's taken a very long time. I've probably been working on my collecting habits since I was in high school era, because I think that's when I first started watching the shows and started recognizing that I had kind of an issue with objects. I very much would collect things attached to my past, to things that were emotionally happy times, or like, for example, I still have my work jacket from when I worked at the animal shelter in 2019, so it's almost been 10 years, and I never wear the jacket, but I still keep it because I'm emotionally attached to it. I've had certain objects for as long as I can remember, just because they were given to me by somebody else. Granted, there's a difference between having something purely because you're emotionally attached to it and having something because you genuinely enjoy looking at it. But definitely the issues start to occur when you're keeping things just for the sake of not wanting to face the anxiety of getting rid of it. So another sign of stage one hoarding is you'll start to exhibit procrastination when it comes to cleaning, organizing, and letting go of objects. It can be very overwhelming to both our mental state, but also just our brain itself. The brain does not function very well in clutter, even though a lot of people convince themselves that, oh, the messy desk, that's just how I am, that's just my personality. It does have impacts on your productivity and your ability to focus, your ability to organize yourself, organize your thoughts, finish tasks. Because our brains don't really like obstacles. And if we face a lot of obstacles to do something, we're not going to want to do that thing. And even like from my own perspective, it can trigger you to put off other things because you're heavily focused on something else. I've had, again, this is something that I'm still to this day working on, where I get hyper focused on the house and I put off doing other things because I have the mindset of like, oh, I just have to get the house clean and then I can do these things. Because the brain doesn't actually like multitasking. And so if it has this mental to-do list around it, like I have to clean my desk, I have to clean the floor, I have to do the laundry, I have to do the dishes, it's going to be kind of obsessed with trying to get those things done before it's allowing itself to move on to other things. And it can lead people to neglect social relationships, to neglect hobbies, to neglect actual tasks that they need to do that they don't like as much. For example, I hate doing laundry. And I don't mind cleaning the laundry, but it's putting it away. That's the problem, because right now, at least, my wardrobe is a lot more expansive than I actually use. And so when I have that big pile that I have to put away, I'm thinking about like, I should be donating some of these. I don't have space for some of these. I don't really know where to put some of these. So it can make me procrastinate on the laundry for a while. And then, of course, you have the added aspect of sometimes when you postpone long enough, it gets mixed in with the dirty clothes and then you have to rewash it. So that's just an example of why too much can definitely keep you from doing the things that you have to do. Also, like cluttered counters can make somebody not want to cook food at home. So you're more likely to start eating out, to avoid having to do the dishes that are you procrastinated on. Things on your desk will keep you from doing paperwork or whatever things that you enjoy doing. So there's a lot of different ways that our clutter can really get in the way of us actually living our lives. So once you get to stage 2, This one is stage 2 is when you start to experience actual distress. There's a lot of fears and anxiety that come with getting rid of the objects. You might feel like you're being wasteful to get rid of the object. Oh, I should just use it first, instead of getting rid of something perfectly good, perfectly usable. You also might have a fear that, well, what if I get rid of it and then I actually need it in the future? I can't handle the idea of not having something. Like, the regret is a very powerful motivation, or fear of regret is a very powerful motivation to keep objects that you don't actually use or would never use. That's actually where the like past self comes into play, where you have these hobbies that you never actually got into, or you have supplies that you never actually used, or things that you bought to fix things and you never got to it. Or like broken furniture that you are going to fix. There's a lot of different things that we keep because we think, oh, one day I'm going to do this. But eventually that type of stuff will pile up. Then we'll have chairs and tables and all sorts of stuff stacked in our garage, as well as like boxes that we never went through, even though we said we would. Piles of paperwork that we haven't gotten the chance to go through because we're focused on other things. So once you get to clutter expanding onto all your surfaces and an accumulation of unnecessary items, like some people collect newspapers or magazines, you have too much mail to go through, you have excessive decor pieces, or as I said, like dishes everywhere in your kitchen. It begins to make it hard for you to use furniture and surfaces as they were intended. You will also, because of the building amount of visual clutter and just the amount of work that it would take to sift through all of this stuff that you've postponed and procrastinated on, you're going to start having difficulty throwing things away, because we get something called decision fatigue, where our brain is really only able to manage making a certain number of decisions throughout the day. Some people it's kind of on a spectrum where some people are better at it than others, but eventually our brain gets very tired of having to make decisions. And that's why when you do go through the process of decluttering and getting rid of stuff, often it's best to do small chunks at a time. Don't expect to declutter your whole house in one day unless you already don't have a lot of stuff. What you'll want to do is do, like, today I'm going to do my desk surface. Tomorrow I'm going to do my counter next to the sink. The next day I'm going to do my bedside table or whatever. Like, do really small chunks, because one, it makes it easier for your brain to recover over time, because you can get burnt out if you do a whole, this is where I went wrong for a long time. I would do really big declutters. I do really big clean sweeps over the span of like a week or two, neglect everything just to focus on this. And I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't see friends. I would get behind in schoolwork and stuff like that, because I was so like mentally focused, thinking like, this is the solution. If I just finish this, then all of these other problems will be solved. But then after that, I would be supremely burnt out and wouldn't continue with, like, I'd fall off the progress and would start to rebuy things again, or would like go into replacement mode, or I would just be flat out so burnt out that I just wouldn't do anything. So it's important, again, to do these in small, manageable stages. That way you don't accidentally burn yourself out and keep yourself from making actual progress. Also, doing small amounts at the same time, or small amounts at a time, will prevent you from making rash decisions. You obviously don't want to mull over the objects for so long, but if you make a whole bunch of decisions and you force yourself to make decisions that you're already fatiguing with, you're more likely to accidentally get rid of things that are important to you or that you would actually use. So it's really important to go slow, use, as I said, do really small amounts that allow you to actually process the things that you're going through, and you're able to make more intelligent decisions about what to keep and what not to keep. Um, Once you get to stage 2 of hoarding as well, you are going to probably have a lot of things that are broken or no longer useful to you. And because of the amount of stuff all around your house, especially with surfaces and furniture that might be unusable, or at least you have to move all the books off the couch to be able to sit there, or you have to move all the papers and stuff off the table just to be able to use it. This is when you start to experience embarrassment about the clutter. And you're more likely to start neglecting your social responsibilities and your social um, friendships and stuff like that, because um, you don't want them to see where you live. There's a huge stigma still in society about people who have a lot of clutter being dirty or being unintelligent or being like, there's all these negative connotations with people that are struggling with hoarding and collecting issues, which is not true. A lot of people, most people, honestly, develop hoarding disorder because of trauma in their life. Either they lost something, they lost someone, or they just grew up in that environment. I've heard of people's hoarding disorder starting because of um, a attack. They were experienced some sort of assault. I've heard of people starting hoarding because they lost their previous home in a fire and lost everything that they owned. I've heard of some people becoming hoarders because they're paranoid about the future. They think like a war is coming or something like that. Or a really, really common one is the death of a parent or a close loved one, husband, wife, child, stuff like that, because you can people frequently use shopping and collecting as a way to assuage their own anxiety. They think that if they buy that thing, it'll give them happiness, which briefly it does, but as I've talked about in previous streams, happiness is not a permanent state. It's only a fleeting feeling, and eventually, the novelty of that object is going to disappear, and it's just going to be another item in the background of your entire home. So, yeah, a lot of the time it is triggered by a very emotional experience. There's some cases where it's just strictly disorder related. They have an actual like mental disorder. But a lot of the time it's triggered by an actual event or a series of events. Another one that I've noticed that can cause hoarding disorder is a big change, particularly retirement. A lot of the cases that I've seen on Hoarders Buried Alive, the TV show, it's people that are of advanced age, like 60, 70, 80, and they started collecting after they stopped working because they didn't have anything else to do. They didn't know what to do with their life. They didn't know what to do with their time. And so they switched to buying things because it filled the time. It gave them purpose, or it gave them a sense of like doses of happiness, essentially. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons that can cause it, but usually the more severe the trauma, the more intense the hoarding issues. With stage 2, the avoidance behaviors, uh, the desire to ignore the problem becomes a lot more apparent, especially for a trained therapist or individuals in their lives that are close to them. They might rationalize their hoarding, um, and start feeling stress at the thought of getting rid of the objects. Their home is still functional, but the clutter has started to interfere with their daily life. I would say that in my life, I was probably at stage 2. It was particularly bad in college because when I transitioned from high school, living with my mom, who was very overbearing and kind of controlling a bit. And then she also very much associated, like, I care about you, so I buy you things. I think she probably has a form of emotional attachment to stuff, but that's beside the point. Um, I'm not actually related to her, I'm adopted. But I transitioned from living at home with her, where she kind of did everything for me because she just wanted um, to going to college and having to do everything for myself. And I had no idea how to manage my stuff, no idea how to manage my time. I didn't, I was not prepared for living by myself, or at least with roommates. And I also didn't really have, I had moved a couple cities over. I was probably like an hour and a half away from my parents. So I was virtually by myself in terms of my family's help. And also, I was trying to reinvent my identity and trying to figure out who I was. And so I relied heavily on like going shopping and spending time at the mall or spending time in Target with my friends, just to feel like I was developing my sense of self. Um, and and then also in that time period, I was trying to buy the things that aligned with my interests and stuff like that. So I ended up getting into the habit of accumulating things just to bring myself happiness, just to make myself feel like I was organized or something. Like I would buy organizational tools and things that I thought would help me, furniture and stuff like that. And I also had that tendency to keep things that I thought would be useful. Like I would have bags of random strings because, oh, what if I need them? Or I just keep a bunch of stuff that I didn't need. And like my bed would like I'd sleep with clean laundry on the bed, or I would have papers everywhere and I couldn't find where my homework was. I was constantly moving things around and rearranging things, trying to create more space, even though I really should have just been getting rid of the things. And then I also started to neglect my social relationships. I would prefer to stay home and declutter or rearrange or clean or whatever I was doing. It was honestly more of a like merry-go-round of wasting time, where I wasn't actually fixing my lifestyle. I was just delaying and procrastinating on other things using the excuse of organizing. And then, of course, I had distress with the idea of losing things, distress with the idea of not having things. Some of my hoarding was linked to like disaster preparation and stuff like that. Oh, well, I need it in case like the world ends, and what if I don't have this particular book that I'll need survive, like that kind of stuff. So there is definitely a lot of that emotional component to my hoarding issues. But I was still kind of in denial where I'd be watching these hoarding shows, be like, well, I'm not that bad. So, but I had none of the tools that I have today to help myself think my way out of keeping all of this stuff. So stage 3 is once hoarding begins actually affecting your ability to actually access parts of your house. You might not be able to use a bathroom. Maybe your hallway is so cluttered that you can't get through it without stepping over things or walking on top of things. You might have beds or sofas that are unusable because they're covered in stuff. I think I probably reached stage 3 hoarding at a certain point in college, towards the end of my college career, particularly around the time that my dad died. I distinctly remember a time period when, like, my room was frankly kind of gross. Like, there was just trash on the floor. I was afraid to come out of my room. It was partially because I had roommates that I did not like. They were very mean girly. And I was very reclusive at the time. I was collecting hobbies and stuff, but not actually indulging in them. I remember there was a time period where I was so, like, I opened the closet and there was nothing in there. I had a whole full closet, but it was giving me so much anxiety just trying to pick an outfit that I cried. So I really had started the avoidance of interactions, which is one of the classifications of stage 3. I didn't want people to come to my house, to come to my dorm. I was embarrassed for my roommates to have to see it. I was scared if they ever did inspections that they might think that they might, like, get mad at me. I did have, like, trash on the floor and papers that I hadn't gone through and all sorts of stuff everywhere. Once you get to stage 3, you might also have household maintenance issues, like broken appliances, non-functional plumbing, your toilet doesn't work, but you're too embarrassed by your house to let somebody come in and fix it. You might have, you might not be able to use the sink because there's stuff in it. So that's a common thing to see with advanced hoarding. I've seen really, really severe examples, which would be more like stage 5, which I'll get to. But I've seen some really crazy examples where they're, like, going in buckets because their toilet has been non-functional for such a long time. It's quite sad. But I definitely would have emotional distress when attempting to declutter, which would lead to that procrastination that I kind of described earlier, where you're just so overwhelmed, you don't know where to start. There's stuff all over the place. You don't really know what to keep and what not to keep. And you also don't know how to manage the emotions that come with getting rid of stuff. It also can start affecting your daily functioning, like your hygiene, eating habits, stuff like that. And you start to have outward emotions in regard to your hoarding behaviors where you might feel very overwhelmed, you might feel ashamed, defensive, and you could start, as I said, like what happened with me, you start socially isolating yourself because you're trying to avoid judgment from the people around you. One thing that can really, really help if you have what you think are tendencies for hoarding disorder, talk to somebody. I know it's really scary because the idea of opening up to somebody about hoarding disorder, like, it's associated with the sense of failure, and you are a disgusting person, or you're like a lot of self-esteem related issues, I promise you there's going to be people in your life that are supportive and caring. And if you're open and vulnerable, which I know is really difficult, you're going to find people that can help you. You'll have friends or family members that are willing to be there with you. Just be open to their advice, because I see that a lot in the TV shows where the person, even though they have friends and family that are coming in to help them, they're very resistant to that help because they still haven't done the work to detach their emotions from their belongings. And so they'll get mad and try and like kick the person out, or they just don't want to listen. Try to be open-minded. It'll take a lot of work to trust other people to help you make those decisions, but it's definitely worth it. Having an external perspective to help you think about your objects differently. Another piece of advice is to get a professional to help you. Find a therapist that specializes in hoarding disorder. I highly recommend getting an actual clinical psychologist / therapist rather than one of those online fake therapist people. They don't always have the correct credentials, and might just be like somebody you can talk to, more akin to a friend than somebody that actually has expertise. So I would advise against using the like therapy apps, because oftentimes they don't actually employ licensed or educated professionals. It could just be well-meaning people that don't really have the tools that you might need. Once you get to stage 4 hoarding, this is when you start to get like really unsanitary activity conditions. You're going to see blocked living spaces, where you might not be able to use an entire bathroom. You might not be able to access a certain room in the house or multiple rooms in the house. You might have so much dishes and stuff built up in your kitchen that you are not able to use the oven. You're not able to use the sink. You're not able to use the fridge because the fridge is unsanitary and has like rotting food in there and stuff that you can't even identify anymore. You'll have like, you're very likely to have pest or mold infestation. You might have like fleas in your carpet or bed bugs, or as I said, like mold growing in areas. And it becomes quite unsanitary. You might have trash in living quarters, or like rotting food hidden under objects. You probably are getting to the point where there's going to be unsavory smells in your house that you can't identify. You don't know where it's coming from. There's a good chance that your floors are exceptionally messy. And also, I will say sometimes, not as common, but sometimes you might have container hoarders where they don't actually have disgusting messes, but they just have like boxes and boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. But I more commonly, at least from the shows, maybe it's biased because obviously they are going to show the more extreme examples for views and stuff. But I more commonly see that it's just unorganized hoarding. But it is possible to be a hoarder that isn't actually just in this stage of mismanagement. But this often happens because you're so overwhelmed by the stuff that you're not able to actually get the tasks done. You have so much stuff that it's overwhelming to clean everything, to maintain everything, to wash all your dishes in one setting. You're just behind. And so you end up compensating in other ways and just kind of ignoring the things around you because it's too overwhelming to think about. This is why it's so important to do little by little actions to better your environment if you're dealing with something like this, because it allows you to clean small areas and slowly make your surroundings more livable, while preserving your mental health, preventing severe anxiety, and it gives you a sense of accomplishment when you see that you've cleaned off the desk. Even if the whole house is a mess, it feels good to see a little bit of progress. So that's why doing it little by little is very important. And again, it's once you get to these more severe levels, it's really good to have other people around you that are able to help you accomplish your decluttering goals. Hi, can you go downstairs? Once you get to this stage, individuals will likely feel trapped. They might feel out of control. They just don't know how to take action yet. As I said earlier, hoarding often has a very deep emotional root, linked to trauma or loss or overwhelming anxiety. And it's important to confront these emotions because you might be able to clean out your house, but you won't be able to prevent future relapse, just like alcoholism, just like drug addiction. Hoarding is a possibly recurrent disorder where you can relapse. You can go back to that state even after doing a clean. So it's super, super important to confront your emotions, to figure out why you have these issues, and address them head on. That way you can actually solve the root cause rather than the symptom. It's very similar to like if you have anxiety or depression or PTSD, you're not treating the symptoms, you're treating your ability to handle the underlying cause. And once you address the actual cause, you know how to approach it in the future to prevent yourself from making similar decisions going forward. Because oftentimes people get through a cycle, which is something I experienced for probably about 10 years, where I go through cycles of I get rid of a whole bunch of stuff and then I just allow things to filter back into the house, and then I end up with too much stuff. My last, I'd say, hoarding episode, I have bipolar disorder, which contributes to my hoarding disorder because one of the characterizations of mania is you might go on shopping sprees. My last one was around the time my daughter was born, or she was a baby. My husband was overseas, and I was taking care of two kids by myself for a couple months at a time. And I was experiencing single motherhood, in a sense. And I relied on shopping to feel better about myself. And we'd also just moved into the house. So I was very heavily like, I didn't know what to do with the rooms in the house. And I was buying toys for the kids and I was buying clothes for myself. And I was like, full disclosure, I spent like $3,000 in a matter of like 2 weeks during that manic episode. Since I've been on medication to help with my mood, it has allowed me to think a lot more clearly about my purchasing decisions. And so that's been part of helping me resolve my hoarding tendencies. But I still have to do a lot of mental work because there's things that I still will buy or behaviors that I have that cause me to accumulate things. So I've had to do a lot of work on, and then also with getting rid of stuff, I've had to do a lot of mental work with coaching myself to not feel that level of attachment, to see when I'm keeping something just because. So yeah, I still have to use a lot of mental tools to work on myself over time, and um, change the way I think about purchasing and accumulating and getting rid of things. I'm currently, right now, I'm going through all of the books we have in the house, because it was getting to the point where there's always books all over the place because of the kids and myself, and there's a lot of books I wasn't reading and the books that the kids weren't reading. So I've been doing that, but I've toned down how I declutter. So I'm no longer spending weeks at a time decluttering the whole house. I do little bits at a time, and that's helped tremendously with my progress. Once you get prevention is almost like a necessity. It's chances are you're not going to be able to do it by yourself, because you're going to have a lot of mental things going on in your mind that will prevent you from making the decisions that you should. And so you'll need to have a professional walking alongside you, helping you reframe your thinking, and help you what's the word? Rethink how you look at the items in your life. Once you get to stage 5, that is hoarding that can have basically life-threatening consequences. These are usually what you're going to see on hoarding disorder episodes, because they're so outrageous, that the hoarding is so outrageous that it could cause structural damage to the house. I've seen stories where they have so much stuff that it's literally pushing through the roof, pushing walls over. You'll see like holes in the floor. There was one where like they couldn't even declutter the house because it was deemed unsafe to enter. The roof was about to collapse. Sometimes it's just because of the stuff, the sheer weight of those objects, but sometimes it could be caused just because their house is so hoarded, they neglect the work that is required to care for a house. They don't repair the roof when there's damage. They might have pipes burst and have water damage. It's also a fire hazard. I've seen there's one guy that was living in his burned out home that he had re-hoarded after the fire, because he had so much stuff. His house caught fire, and obviously they couldn't do anything, because there's so much stuff, especially when you have like clothing and furniture and papers and all sorts of flammable materials. Sometimes you might even have like hazardous waste, or like they had gas cans hidden in their house. There's another episode where he had like 20 guns hidden throughout his house. So they had to go through with like a whatever, I forgot what they're called, but like the gun expert part of the police force, to make sure that they were able to secure all the weapons while they're going through all the stuff. So there's going to be a lot of issues affecting the function of the house. They might not have usable plumbing. The city might have turned off their gas, or turned off their electricity. All kinds of issues that can come with stage 5. Oftentimes, you basically have lost functional living space. None of the rooms, or most of the rooms, are not usable. People at this point might be sleeping in chairs, or are sleeping in areas that are unsafe. There was one woman I remember seeing that was literally sleeping in her bathtub because that was the only place that she had to lay down. There's no rooms that are adequately accessible. There's probably stuff all over the floor. There's stuff in the doorways. There's stuff all over the surfaces. You can't even tell where the table is because it's just a pile of stuff. And this is the point where you can experience the city coming to you and complaining. And they can issue evictions for hoarding problems due to housing code violations. If you have children, you might be at risk of CPS being called because it's unsanitary and unsafe for children to live in those houses. Um, and oftentimes at this stage, the person is often completely unwilling or in denial of the situation. And they are very resistant to actually changing things. And see it as so overwhelming that just a small amount of work can be wildly emotionally distressing to them. Um, Stage 5 hoarding, as I said, is usually what you'll think about when you think of hoarding situations. Another additional risk with hoarding, if you do clean out the house, if you do manage to work with this person to empty out their house and fix everything up, sometimes their house is still unusable. You still have to knock down the whole house. But the people are a lot more like, when you have more severe hoarding cases, they're more likely to rebound or relapse, because even the loss of all that stuff can cause significant issues after the situation, which is why like ongoing care is so important. Just because you clean the house doesn't mean the problems are gone. As I said earlier, you have to identify, or you have to work with the underlying problem before you can make sure that it does not continue. It's common for them to have mental health crises during the cleaning process and after the cleaning process. They might have depression, especially like being in that empty house. It can be kind of a shock, especially if like you lose things that you cared about, things got broken or damaged that you had to throw away that you cared about. And then there's also that distress and shame for what they did, the embarrassment of the money that they lost. So it can be very challenging post cleaning for people. And oftentimes there's going to need to be a whole team that becomes involved. You'll need to have the family there. You'll need to have therapists, social workers, professional organizers that can help them get back on the right track. And then obviously you might even need medication and all sorts of things. If you know somebody that has level 3, level 4, level 5 hoarding, I mean, even the lower levels, but for sure with like the higher levels, you have to be very patient and understanding. It could be very frustrating for family members to see their family member going through that, and they might be angry, like, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you acting this way? Why can't you just throw everything away? And so it's really, really important that if you are working with somebody that has hoarding disorder, to be as understanding as possible, because as I've said, hoarding disorder is heavily linked to emotional pain and trauma. And because at these later stages, they're going to be more defensive and denial, stuff like that. They're not going to see the situation in the same way that you are. They're not going to see the risks. They're going to see more so the fear of regret, the fear of loss, the fear of just being confronted by all of these decisions. So you want to be as understanding as you possibly can be and try to think from their perspective, but still be rational with them, still be honest with them. Like, no, you shouldn't keep that rusted bike that's been back in your backyard for 10 years. But again, be patient with them, because it can take a very long time to recover after this. And again, you can have relapses years later, triggered by additional events. So it's also good to keep up with that person and be there for them and help them continue rethinking their habits. And if you do notice a change in their behavior back towards hoarding, to address it as soon as possible and to connect them with resources that can help them. Um, as I kind of said earlier, hoarding is not a personal failure. It is not because there's something wrong with you. It is because you have had a trauma and your mind is trying to compensate using belongings. But know that it's possible to recover. There are people that have had extremely severe cases of hoarding, but have been able to recover. So, lastly, I wanted to go over the benefits of becoming minimalist, of reducing your possessions and focusing more on living rather than collecting and maintaining and owning everything. Because, as I said at the very beginning, owning things has a cost, whether you recognize it or not. The time it takes to maintain it, the money it takes to maintain it, the money it takes to acquire it, and just the mental load of having all of these things everywhere, especially as a parent. Like if you have kids, if you have pets, it can give you anxiety of like, what if it gets broken? You might be more angry at your kids because they're touching things and pulling things out. So there's a lot of different reasons to become minimalist, besides avoiding hoarding disorder. One of the benefits is spending less. If you are not accumulating things, if you're not needing to get the latest decor items or the latest clothing or the latest furniture or whatever, you're not going to be spending as much money. And that money, and especially nowadays, like we shouldn't be giving our money to corporations because they don't care about us. If you do need things, go to thrift stores. There's everything at thrift stores these days. Like they get so much stuff at thrift stores that they have been throwing things out that they get because there's just so much stuff they can't, even thrift stores can't handle the intake of items. So if you focus more on minimalist living, if you focus more on doing things rather than owning things, you're going to save your money and you're going to be able to put that money instead towards things that actually matter to you. You can create a safety fund. You can put it towards things like classes that you actually like, activities that you actually like, going for a sport, going for a like stuff like that. You'll also experience less stress when you can move freely around your house, when you don't have to move things just to sit down, when you don't have to look around your house and see all the things that need to be done. Your mind is more able to relax. You're able to be in your thoughts rather than like you can enjoy your mental time because your mind isn't focused on like, I still have to do the dishes, I still have to do the laundry, I still have to do XYZ. And it also can make it easier to pick out what tasks need to be done rather than like, I have to do everything today. I have to do the laundry, I have to do all the clean off the counters, I have to XYZ. You aren't going to be stressing out about things and you can actually attack tasks that need to be done right then instead of having to clean up first before you can do the said task. Because as I said, your brain fatigues, and if you have to clean your house before you can actually do things, chances are you're never going to actually do those things. It's also going to be easier to clean. Again, that contributes to less stress. But the fewer items you have, the fewer things there are to clean, and it makes cleaning significantly less annoying to do because maybe all you have to do is wipe down the counters and do a few dishes rather than like clearing out your entire counter space just to be able to wash dishes. I remember there was a time period where especially it was when my daughter was young, where I just chronically was not doing dishes and they were all over the counters. I couldn't access the counters. I didn't want to wash the dishes because to do the dishes I'd have to clear the sink, and I just like was procrastinating because it was so overwhelming. So having fewer things will make it easier for you to do the tasks that you actually need to do on a regular basis, and it won't make it feel so much like drudgery. You'll also get a sense of freedom. You won't feel tied to the material possessions in your home, especially if you've done that mental work. You won't feel as much anxiety with losing those things. You won't feel the need to collect everything. And you'll kind of have a new sense of independence because you don't feel like you're trapped at home having to do all of these things before you can go out. You won't feel guilty about having people come over or stressed out about people coming over. You're going to be able to use your backyard because you don't have to like we don't want to use that space because it's just like I don't have to look at that. I don't have to look at the rusted materials and broken plywood that I have thrown out in my backyard and stuff like that. People can also hoard their backyards. It's not just in the house. It's also my favorite reason, good for the environment. The less we consume, the less damage we do to the environment. Plastics, chemicals, all sorts of stuff. Clothing. I could probably actually do a whole episode on just the clothing industry and how much damage it does to the environment. But our belongings have a huge impact on the environment, and contribute to the pollution that we experience worldwide. So it's really, really good for the environment to consume less and to feel the need to purchase less. And also, when we purchase less items, we're able to like collect like kitschy jewelry and decorations that are just cheap little things, and like clothes that are really like Shane type clothing or costume jewelry. But when you invest in a smaller number of high quality pieces, you'll feel more of a responsibility to actually care for it and clean it, to respect it. And you'll be less inclined to buy. I've noticed that since I raised my bar on what I buy, like I no longer allow myself to buy like cheap crap. It's made it easier to say no to objects because I can look at the quality, be like, that doesn't actually hit what I need. And so it makes it easier to save money because a lot of the stuff out there is garbage, to be honest. It's really crappy stuff that the companies are trying to encourage us to buy for the season. So once you start to set like quality limits, it has to be these materials, it has to be this, like it needs to last this long, it needs to be a higher quality stuff, you're going to be less inclined to buy all that cheap crap. You'll also be more productive when we're not doing as much with our stuff, when we're not having to maintain things, move things around, clean things all the time. You'll be able to actually pursue passions of yours. You'll have more time to spend on actual hobbies rather than just collecting the hobby items. It's also a really, really good way to, I kind of said this earlier, but you can direct money to different areas where you can now afford to pursue these hobbies that you genuinely care about rather than just a bunch of stuff that you don't actually use. It's good for the kids as well. If you have kids and pets, having less stuff on the floor allows you to have more time to spend with your kids. When they have less toys, they actually play better, play longer. They have more creativity in the play that they're engaging in. They'll fight less if you have multiple kids over the toys that they have. It might sound counterintuitive, but when you have fewer toys, they actually tend to get better at sharing. Um, so there's huge benefits to kids as well as the parents, because whether they display it or not, kids will experience anxiety in a space that's messy, because they won't feel the same respect for their objects, for their toys, as they do when they have fewer items. And it allows them to develop more of a love of their things rather than just seeing it's hard for them to pick with toys and stuff like that. There's a whole psychology behind how it actually affects children as well. And it is different than how it affects the adults, because they don't have the same rationalization as parents do, or that adults do. But it has a dramatic impact on their mental health as well. So it's really important for your kids to create a space like that, because, as I said, it creates mental safety, and it also allows you to actually spend more time with them, because you're not spending all your time cleaning. You're not getting angry at them because they pull all their books out. If they do and you have less of them, all you have to do is like, oh, I just have to put back this one bookshelf, as opposed to like there's 1,000 books all over the house and I'm so annoyed. Personal experience. So it's beneficial for your kids, and it's beneficial for your pets if you have them, because it can actually stress out the animals. It makes it harder for you to clean up after your animals, and it can be dangerous for them because they can actually have things fall on top of them. They might leave their waste around your house. They also might be eating things off the floor that are unsanitary or unhealthy for them. So it makes it easier for you to care for your pets better as well. I won't get into it, but there is also animal hoarding. I could totally do another episode just on that. But it does apply to pets as well. You'll also have to you'll also have the opportunity to own higher quality things. That kind of goes hand in hand with what I was saying earlier, where you're able to divert money to things that are actually good for your life. Less is better. And when you have less, you're able to spend more of your resources on high quality things that will last longer. You'll also have a home that makes you happier. It's more appealing to be in. It's not as stressful. You don't have to see your to-do list in front of your face all of the time. And so it makes it easier to relax. You're able to use your furniture. You're able to use your surfaces. You don't have to postpone things that you like to do because there is no space to do those things. The more you have, the more that stuff owns you, the more it tells you to do things, the more it makes you feel like you are not accomplishing what you need to do. You also are kind of releasing your past. Let me close my door real quick. You are creating, when you declutter and you get rid of all the stuff that you don't need, you're freeing yourself from ties to the past, from past selves, from past lives, from past experiences that maybe doesn't matter to you. And again, this can assuage a lot of anxiety. It allows you to let go of obligations that you think that you owe yourself, like, well, I need to learn these things or pursue this hobby. I have these things, so I should use it. It frees up that space so you can actually pursue the things that matter most to you. For example, I just gave up all of my knitting supplies because I realized that as much as I'd love to learn how to knit, I just do not have the patience to do so. And so I have chosen to narrow down the hobbies that I pursue so I can give more of my time to my children, to my writing, and to the other few pursuits that I really enjoy. Um, you'll also be surrounded by things that are more meaningful to you, treasures and things that are actually important rather than just like a bunch of decorations that you feel you need to switch up for the seasons and stuff like that. And it going along with reducing the stress, less stuff, you find things easier. You're not going to lose that bill. You're going to be able to find your shoes when it's time to go out the door. You'll be able to find those clothing outfits that you really like to use. And you won't have to keep digging through your house to try and find things. And it, again, that will definitely lower your stress. It can also allow you to live in smaller spaces, which again will help you save money. Homes are basically the most expensive thing that you'll ever buy in your life. Or if you're living in an apartment, if you feel the need to have all of that stuff, it's going to cost more to transport that stuff. It's going to cost more to have to get a bigger house. Like very, very common when rich people buy mansions, they buy stuff to fill up the house. So when you have smaller spaces, you feel less inclined to buy things, and you'll also feel more comfortable having a smaller space, because that's often what motivates people to buy a larger space. Besides having more children, it's because they have too much stuff and they need to fit it somewhere else. And you can also save money because you won't have to have a storage unit, which is, there's literally more storage units than there are grocery stores. More like storage facilities. It is a very lucrative industry for the companies that sell space. So if you have less stuff, you don't need a storage unit. It can be very beneficial for your pocketbook. It can be very beneficial for your mental health. And lastly, I just want to give you some tips on how to think about your stuff, because really that's the most crucial component, is reframing how you look at your belongings. One of the things that is tremendously helpful to me is this saying that I learned probably back in high school. It was something my friend's mom used to say. What people would rather have more than their money. Oftentimes we buy the thing because we think we need it, we think we want it, we think it'll give us some flash of excitement. But think about having that money instead. It'll make it easier for you to rationalize, like, I would rather have that $50 to go towards a bill, or to go towards gasoline, or to go towards food that I really like, than to spend it on a shirt that I may or may not actually use. It can take time to reframe your mind like that, because we often attach objects to success. We think that if we buy the thing, it'll help us accomplish certain goals, but that's often not the case. You don't need items to help you become the person that you want to be. And that was another mental reframe that helped me tremendously, is to understand that just because you have the object doesn't mean you'll develop the habit. I always had them, or not always, but in the past, I had the mindset that all I needed to do was buy the thing and then I'll be organized. I had to buy the agenda book. I just had to find the right notebook and I would magically develop the certain habit that I wanted. Or if I had the organizing tool, then I would automatically be organized. But that's not the case. Building your habits is a muscle, and an object does not help you build the muscle. It just becomes a distraction and an obstacle for those muscles to be built. Granted, it does help some people, but make sure you don't invest more into that invest more money into that habit than you invest your time, because your time investment is going to be worth way more, because it's going to allow you to develop that new way of thinking, the new habit. And eventually when you do a habit enough, it becomes automatic, and it makes it easier for you to do things seamlessly in the future, because your mind doesn't actually have to make the decision to do it. Your mind just automatically goes into the mode to do that particular thing. Um, Another thing that's really helped me is having the container method, where everything have to fit within a certain space. All of my books have to fit on a particular bookshelf. For example, I limit myself, all my trinkets and cool collectible objects, they have to fit in my office space. And if they don't, then I get rid of it. So I'm more choosy with only keeping the things that matter the most. All my kids' toys fit on one bookshelf in one room, and it allows me to, like, when I'm out somewhere, if I have the urge to, like, oh, I want to buy this for them, I get to think to myself, well, do I actually have a space to put it? And it allows me to make a better decision, because I'm like, ooh, I don't have the space. Or I could be like, actually, there's another set of toys that they don't use that I can swap out. So it makes it a lot easier for me to make decisions for myself. Same with clothes. Like right now, I'm holding off on buying any clothes until I get rid of the things that I don't use anymore, because I know I don't have the space for it right now. And so I don't want to, like, buy a whole bunch of stuff before I've kind of culled what I'm not using. Another thing that has helped a lot is to create a cleaning routine first. One of the mistakes I made early on was I thought I had to declutter first and then develop the cleaning habits. But what I realized is it's much better to develop the cleaning habit first, because then you take care of the rotating duties that you have first, and then you get a chance to see what you actually use. So instead of procrastinating on all the laundry and thinking that I need to get rid of everything first, I just maintain the laundry cycle. I maintain the washing dishes cycle. I have a routine for picking up toys at a certain time every day, and cleaning out the living room. Like, I have different everything in the house is assigned to a different time period. And that has made it a lot easier to declutter, because instead of being overwhelmed by, like, the whole house is a mess, it regularly gets done, and I get to see the areas where there is excess and is overflow, and I get to see what is being used. Even though the process is a lot slower, it is far less stressful, but also far more productive. And another aspect is to get the family involved. It can take a little bit of giving up a sense of control. I used to kind of have a control issue, but releasing that sense of control and accepting other people's help and feedback has made it a lot easier for me to make better decisions. And I've also, this was another reframe that actually came somewhat recently for me, is to understand that just because you don't have the object anymore doesn't mean the memory is gone. And you don't have to have things memorializing things that you care about. You don't. You just don't need to keep things just for the memories. It's helpful to kind of curate what is most important to you. That way you can make better decisions on what to keep. Especially if you're not using something, even if it's attached to something that you care about, I would get rid of it, because that is taking up space, mental space and physical space, but all it's doing is reminding you of the past time period. So it's important to reframe how you attach memories to objects, and realize that the objects aren't the memories. They have memories attached to them, but it isn't actually going to bring back the past for you. It's not going to bring back the person. and it's not going to give you the same feelings that the actual event or person gave you to begin with. And there are ways to memorialize things that you have a hard time getting rid of. Like you can turn a bunch of old t-shirts into a quilt. You can turn scraps of papers and photographs and stuff like that that you care about into scrapbooks. You make collages out of little knickknacks that you've collected. There's a lot of ways to utilize the things that you collect in a way that honors them and gives them a sense of like respect and stuff like that. So there on like look online, there's so much out there ideas of how you can utilize things that you care about without having to keep the entire object. One quick example, my mom has a baby grand piano that was my dad's grandmother's, and it was from the 1920s. It's a really nice piano, but it's basically like pianos warp over time. And so it's becoming non-functional. And so she's hired somebody to make an art piece out of parts of the piano. That way she can get rid of the piano, but still has that object, that memory, that important thing in her life without it taking up all that space. And then lastly, give up the guilt. Sometimes we get held back by the guilt of that we did it, that we hoarded, that we had this tendency. So becoming minimalist means accepting that you made mistakes, accepting that you gave away that money. You bought the item, that money's gone. Unless you want to take the time to sell those items, which I would caution you with, because one, nowadays you're probably not, unless it's like actually valuable, you're probably not going to get much for the things that you're trying to sell, if at all. So I would caution against keeping everything just to sell it online unless you know you're actually going to do that. I also would be hesitant to suggest thrifting everything because, as I said, thrift stores are overwhelmed and they oftentimes just throw out what you donate to them. Fun fact, they throw out most of the Labubus they get because they get so many. But don't hold on to things thinking that you have to send it to the perfect home. Sometimes it's best to just throw that stuff out. Accept that you spent the money on that thing and that money is gone, which is super hard for people to think about because they don't want to feel like they wasted money. But unfortunately, that is a reality. Once you bought that item, that money is gone. And stop associating it with that cost and just start thinking of it as a waste of space and time. And you'd rather, like the way I think about it now is, would I rather have this object or would I rather have the time to do my poetry instead of taking care of this object? And that has helped tremendously. When you attach it to what you can gain rather than what you lose, it makes it significantly easier to give up objects because you're seeing the real trade-off. You're seeing, if I get rid of all these things, I will be able to spend more time with my kids, spend time with my family, with my friends, instead of cleaning, instead of saying, oh, I'm not going to have this item. And so it can reduce that stress and make you see the value in having that space in your life. So I hope this helped. I really, really vouch for minimalism for your mental health, for your financial health, for your social health. And there's so many different benefits. If you need inspiration, there's a plethora of videos online that will talk to you about different ways of minimalism. There's all sorts of different minimalist personalities out there that you can find some of the influencers that really align with how you are. There's environmental minimalists, there's just aesthetic minimalists, there's also like parent minimalist and stuff like that, extreme minimalist. There's a lot of different types of minimalists out there that put out their content, that talk about advice, that show the way they live, that show the way they think. And I've found that highly valuable even in my own life. I love to watch minimalist content, and it really helps me reframe the way that I think. And again, if you really struggle with it, highly recommend getting professional help, professional organizer, involving friends and family, getting a therapist, psychiatrist, whatever you need to help reduce that anxiety and stress that you get. So I hope this helped, and I hope you learned something. Even if you're not a hoarder yourself, I hope it might help you work with a family member or a friend that also has this issue. So I hope you guys have a good Wednesday. I very much enjoyed talking about this topic with you guys. I'll definitely revisit something similar in the future, probably the effects on children and the benefits of like toy minimalism, because there's so much to this. I really only scratched the surface. There's definitely a lot more I can talk about. So yeah. Thank you for joining us, and I will be here on Friday night. So if you join us then, I'll see you then. Thank you for joining.
Can I say hi?
You can say hi.
Hi.
Now say bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining, Chef and Casey.